I've done a bad thing. Haven't left time, except I'll remain after the hour to answer your personal questions, but I don't have time here. But I just thought it was important to give a couple of concluding remarks here. Lincoln's first inaugural address. This is telling us again something about Lincoln, about how the man thought, still trying to, in some way, bring the South together, knowing that it's probably a lost cause, but stating in his the final words of his address, his inaugural, the mystic chords of memory stretching from every battlefield and patriot grave to every living heart and hearthstone all over this broad land will yet swell the chorus of this union, when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. And I'm going to conclude here with what I think is something that's many times overlooked, and it's the other dimension. Not newspapers or illustrations. I've always tried to make the point that illustrations help educate the people and help keep the, at least in the Union, the citizens aware of what was going on. But there was a spiritual quality to the music that was written at that time that resonated throughout the land. Remember, the music was in churches. It was in meeting halls. The Army marched to music. And I conclude my remarks with Julia Ward Howe. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He had loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. Glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on. Thank you.
Could you describe the process of the woodcuts? Those are not woodcuts, those are...
They're wood engraving.
Wood engraving. What is the difference between them?
All right. The major difference in just straight wood cuts, let's go back to the 16th century. And wood engravings, as they came on during the beginning of the 18th century, was in what is known as the intaglio method. The paper had to go down in between the cuts. In the white line method of wood engraving, which was invented by a Frenchman right at the beginning of the 19th century, the ink was on top. They could do that because they started to use a harder wood. And without having to compress the paper down in the grooves, but just being able to pick up the illustrations on top. And by the mid-century of the high-speed rotary press, they were really able to crank these things out. So, and sometimes it was possible to get an illustration, such as this, on the street 24 hours after the illustrator brought it into the publishing house. How? Well, they'd have as many as 4 illustrators on a picture just this size, divided into 4 parts. And each engraver would do his part, and a master engraver would bond the whole thing together. They'd put it on those high-speed, what was then high-speed presses, and away they go. They could have this picture on the street in a very short period of time. Next question.
I was wondering, and it's the 150th anniversary of the Civil War coming up right now. I was wondering if you have any thoughts on the best way to commemorate the 150th.
The way in which it's being...
Yeah, just the best way to commemorate the 150th anniversary.
Well, there's a commission that's been established in the state of Missouri that's going to make all of this possible, the commemoration of the Civil War. There will be events held. I'm sure there will be something going on down at the old courthouse. Probably be some reenactments. It will be, this will be done nationwide, but there is a Missouri commission. And I wish I had names and dates right at hand here. This is a good question. Yes, it will be commemorated.
This part back here
Yeah.
of the woman holding the bowl.
Yeah, well, I wanted to,
Is that?
again, timing, I knew it's going to be poor, but I had wanted to show you these. They're really interesting. Can everybody get a halfway decent look at these? This is my favorite Custer's Last Fight. It's Frederick Remington. Of course, I like anything that Remington does, but it's beautiful because it has Custer knowing that the end is near, but he's looking west. He's a visionary. He knows that after all of his troopers have gone down, that it will help open the way to westward expansion. So this is sort of a visionary thing. Entirely mythical. Custer was probably killed right at the beginning of the battle from what some of the Indian observers, Sioux observers, have said. The battle was led by Chief Sitting Bull. I think most of us know that. And this 5-stone chromolithograph was painted by Chief Sitting Bull's great-great-granddaughter, who now resides in Stratford, Ontario. And I had the opportunity to meet her and to interview her last summer, and of course it was pretty easy for me to get hooked into buying one of her pictures. But this is very mystic, of course. It's called The Offering, and it's a 5-stone chromolithograph done by the same method as Lewis Kurtz did it 125 years ago. Thanks for asking that question.
Jim,
More, yeah.
in light of the current discussion of how Facebook and, social networks on the internet made all the difference in the recent turmoil in the world, what was, in your opinion, the kind of immediate effect of these illustrations? You said that they showed up in the newspapers like 24 hours,
Yeah.
maybe 48 hours after the battlefield
Right.
cleared. So how did it change things? In what way it affected, nowadays we say, it's all Facebook, it's all these
Right.
social networks. What was the effect then of these?
Well, I think you can answer the question in the same way, that it was a brand new method, just like internet is, in terms of our history, is brand new. What, the last dozen years or 20 years or so. Well, there were always prints, but they took longer, and maybe the issues weren't quite so binding. But as the issue of slavery in the territories came on, and things really heated up, the people demanded more, demanded to know more of what was going on. And remember, I don't have the statistics, but I'm guessing there probably wasn't an extremely large part of the population that was literate. But everybody could look at a picture. Everybody could see a picture. And so the process fed on itself. And it's interesting, Boss Tweed, whom Thomas Nast absolutely despised, he helped bring him down in New York. But as he was going down, Boss Tweed said, I don't really care about the newspapers because most of my constituents can't read. But they can sure as hell look at them damn pictures. Gives you some idea. More. Dean Will.
Well, here's a question about reading. I was interested in your comment on the Fort Wagner scene,
Yes.
which was unusual because you said it actually showed a bayoneting action.
Right.
But if you look at the literature, like the Red Badge of Courage,
Right.
or you look at Whitman's diaries on the Civil War, they're just full of gore. I mean,
Sure.
the atrocity, the human toll of wounds and maimed soldiers. why do you think the pictures keep away from that?
Well, I think in particular, those that were done at the time, and remember, and I'm just going with the illustrators in the north because you really haven't seen that much of what was done of those that were created in the south. But those in the north weren't, I don't feel that they were particularly anxious to show this kind of thing to their readers. Now, the one who broke that bond was Brady, who after the Battle of Antietam, September 1862, did something that broke the mold. He arrived a couple of days after the battle with his photographers, and the line where there were some bodies were sometimes strewn around, maybe they rearranged them a little bit, but they showed the dead and displayed them in Washington. And it was a sensational thing. But, you know, we have instances today, like 10 days ago, where it was determined, I think wisely by the administration, not a very good idea to show the people the picture of bin Laden. I think it's, Gary, I think it's going back to the same line of thought. It's what we choose to show them and why or why we shouldn't maybe. Yes, Bob.
Jim, this is an incredible collection through Washington University. Just amazing, and thank you for it. Are you still adding to the collection? Is there
Yes.
one or two in particular that you're pursuing?
Yes, I am still adding to the collection. I'm not going to say I add to it every year. Sometimes I add to it every month. For example, there is an art fair, a print fair at the Mercantile Library this weekend. And I happen to be on the board there, but I shall also be there with my checkbook in hand. Know I'm going to be buying something. So legally, with the agreement I have with the university, I still technically own the collection. The university stands as the custodian and all the other high titles and offices, but I technically own it, so I feel free to add. I am specifically looking for something that would best illustrate both the 14th and the 15th Amendments to the Constitution. I have a couple of wonderful pictures of the 13th Amendment, but I'd like to get something on the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment. There's one that's been available in Philadelphia. I thought it was a little bit too pricey. I'd also like to have, I mentioned those general orders earlier, the Army General Orders on the Emancipation Proclamation. I had to have printed thousands and thousands, but I've only seen one or two. And a gallery, mainly a book gallery, Abraham Lincoln Book Gallery in Chicago, had it, at least had it a couple of years ago, but I also thought that giving you real money, $3,000, $3,500 was a lot to pay for a sheet of paper. After all, it wasn't the Declaration of Independence or anything. It was a printed general order. But yeah, those are the type of things that I continue to look for. Always have an idea of what I'd like to be able to find.
Jim, I have a question as a fan of this
Yeah.
material. You showed a painting of Longstreet's assault, and you declared it, in your opinion, to be the most accurate.
Yes,
Do you recall who the artist was?
I think it was Hall, H-A-L-L.
And do you think it's more accurate than the Philippatu at the Cyclorama at Gettysburg?
Yeah, I think it probably is.
How so?
Well, because he was, first of all, he was known throughout higher places in the United States as the best of the topographical people of the time. So it was his profession. This is what he did. He was there. There wasn't a hill or a tree that was out of place. And I think he probably just spent a lot more time on the detail. Whereas a cyclorama, And there's one in Atlanta too, as you probably know, Battle of Atlanta. An artist should use a little more freedom. And that's what I would think about. And I've seen the cycle around there at Gettysburg, and I think it's a wonderful display. I just think that Bachelder was more, he was more of an academician. I mean, he was more studious about everything should be, as far as the accuracy.
You thought about getting some of the southern portraits of the time, or southern prints of the time?
Southern prints. I have a very difficult time. I know there's a few of them around, but I have seen some, and some of the prints that we have are being shown from a southern perspective, but they're still done by northern artists. And the only, and I think again it was Vitale, was the only artist that I know of that was on location at the time, but at, and I think it was at Bull Run that he did a rather negative point of view from the standpoint of the Union. And so he then became persona non grata, and he went to the South, and he did some of his work from the South, but from the Southern point of view. But what happened? Well, you know, the resources weren't there. I think the Richmond newspaper continued to publish. I know the newspaper in Vicksburg continued to publish on wallpaper until the siege finally destroyed everything. I just don't think there was as much activity that way. And also, you have to remember that the climate in the South eats things up, like a lot of the great things that are still being found today. And I have been fortunate enough to locate a couple of them myself, are in Pennsylvania, in someone's attic, or storeroom, or barn, where the climate isn't going to be quite so damaging. Ivor, would you have anything to add to that?
I think you're right on with the climate. You visit southern courthouses, which are repositories of other forms of paper records, and they're in, you know, they're almost oatmeal consistency after having survived or not survived that 150-year interval. Can I jump in with a?
Please.
This is more of an appreciation than a question, really. But it also, I mean, it's a theme that is sort of here in your talk, but you maybe didn't, you know, sort of jump on it as much as I've heard you jump on it in other presentations you've made, but also in your recently concluded wonderful MA American Culture Studies MA thesis. That just the phenomenon of this outpouring of, I mean, the Schiele collection represents an extraordinary cultural moment in American history. The fact that really kind of all of a sudden there is this outpouring of physical, visual representation of political life. So think about all of these images as a collectivity. And in a way, it's the same. I mean, I'm just sort of channeling Schiele now. I mean, these are ideas that you've suggested. That the same need to sort of make ideas and ideals physical, to manifest them in paper, in images, in blood on the battlefield. All these things go together. The 620,000 plus dead on the battlefield, and the explosion of visual representation in all of these images are all part of the need of this generation in American history to make sort of physical, palpable, real their ideals, their passions in a way that is quite remarkable. And it's only really when you go to the Schiele collection at Olin Library and see all of this visual imagery, ephemera, all of this print, you suddenly realize what, the kind of cultural energy that is behind this. And I just think your presentation and your collection make that incredibly sort of real and for students to sort of see it and experience it. It's very, very, very powerful.
Thank you.
This is a wonderful way to conclude the discussion, so thanks a lot.